Hey folks, it's Jared Mannanen from the website TahoeTrailGuide.com. Today I'm bringing you a brief tutorial on double poling. Now, if you've ever been on any type of ski before, whether that's alpine skis, telemark skis, or cross-country skis, you should have a generally basic understanding at least of what double poling is. It's essentially keeping our skis together, so one's not in front of the other necessarily, and we're using both of our poles, hence the title double poling, to propel ourselves forward. Probably wondering why in the middle of April I'm producing this video, but all winter, if you've been following my YouTube channel this year, which is 2022, 2023, Tahoe has had just an epic snowy winter that's yielded one storm after another, providing deep snow all season. And I just never got to the point where double poling was something that I was going to do very often because the snow is so deep. So double poling is a basic technique to use on skis, but it doesn't work in every environment. And that deep snow is not very conducive to double poling, whereas today in this spring condition where it's very firm, and you'll notice that all the snow is kind of wavy, it's got pock marks, it's got sun cups, maybe it's a little bit wind scoured or tracked out. Double poling for me is an ideal spring technique or firm snow technique. So it's not just spring, it just happens to be this winter in particular. I didn't really have a whole lot of opportunities to just do a double pole tutorial, whereas today, perfect conditions for it, because that's kind of what I find myself doing a lot of times anyway. And the reason for that is that when trying to diagonal stride, for example, doing traditional cross-country classic technique, you're trying to set that grip zone so you can move forward, but with all this uneven snow, it's not always a guarantee that you're going to actually land your grip zone on a place where it's going to meet the snow ideally so that you can push off forward. So there's a tendency where you can just constantly slip and slide the whole way as you're going forward. Whereas double pole, you're only gliding on the skis and you're poling with your ski poles, and those are definitely making contact with the snow and propelling forward. So long story short, we're doing the double pole tutorial today. Okay, I have poles. I'm going to do a little bit of a dry land demonstration of just some of the finer details of double poling. Again, if you've been on skis before, you probably have a general idea of what you're doing. However, there are these minor technical aspects that are worth really tuning into to get the most out of your double poling experience. And again, it's a very simplified form of skiing or gliding over snow because you're taking a lot of the moving parts out of the equation, like we were diagonal striding, right? We got to coordinate all these different things here, whereas with a double pole, the skis are kind of out of the equation. We're just having the tips line up so that they're equally apart, hip width apart, as well as just fore and aft. We're right basically in the middle of those skis. And then the poles, they're just going like this. Double poling is not a bow, it's not a squat, it's somewhere in between. It's not necessarily a crunch, but it is a core workout. It's engaging your core. I also want to clarify that idea of engaging your core. It really is a combination of engaging the core as we're compressing down, as we're powering down. We're allowing gravity to help drop us and land on the poles so that we can get as much power generated out of those pole plants as possible. So it is a connection or a coordination between both engaging core but also allowing gravity to play a role in us. And this is not unlike the compression before we diagonal stride, where we're letting this little impulse down flatten the ski to grip with our grip zone onto the snow so that we can push off. So all this stuff is connected, it's all related. So just start to develop this feeling too of like dropping down onto skis, dropping down onto poles, dropping down onto skis, just enough. So as we're moving together, our body parts, we're taking our hands, we're linking them to our hips. So think of maybe a string on your belt buckle, for example. When I engage my core, the hands come down with the hips, but then they also rise with the hips. a lot of people don't realize this connection, and they'll just use hands the whole time poling, and that's one way of doing it. It's not the most efficient or effective method, but it is one way of doing it. But let's try to get away from that aspect and go into this comprehensive movement that ties everything together so that we can push forward with every compression and glide. So the idea, again, not Frankenstein arms sticking straight out, not T-Rex arms too close to the body. We want those arms to be somewhere bent, right, this natural bend, and then we want to engage core and also engage the hands and therefore the pulls. A lot of people think it's a tricep movement too. They'll want to do this kind of push back type thing. The triceps really are only engaging toward the end of the movement, but be careful with that concept. Again, just keep the structure, this structure of your arms together with your hips, with your core, with this drop in weight, but also a slight compression of the abs, right? So keep that together, and then try to let your hands, once they reach your hips, come back. So you're thinking gunslinger, for example. We push down and we raise them up. Push down, raise them up. And the reason we want to coordinate our hands and our hips is because, like with most things in cross-country skiing, we want to capitalize on forward momentum. So if my timing looks something like this, where I'm pushing back and then bringing my hips forward and then hands forward, like, don't do that. I see a lot of people will go like, you know, like this kind of movement, and your hands are going back, your hips are going forward, and you look very awkward and it's not effective. So we want to coordinate that movement. We want to hands down as we sink our weight, do that small crunch, for lack of a better term, and then exploding forward with our hips and our hands at the same time, so that our energy is driving forward together and we're moving forward, capitalizing on momentum. And that's kind of what we always want to do. We don't want to sail our hands way back and then have that energy draw us back. We just want to enough and then forward. Real simple, yeah. Take some people a few tries to figure that timing out, but again, thinking of some connection between your ski pole grip to your belt buckle, so when you rise back up with your hips, it brings your hips forward. I'm not gonna demonstrate necessarily World Cup racer double poling where they're really driving forward. I think for the average person who's not trying to double pole to save their life, just stick with basics. You can still have that slight forward lean, but don't think of jumping up or some type of mimicking of a jumping up, because that's not what double poling is. It's the reason those guys look like they're coming really high is, one, they are, but they're also leaning very far forward. I think for the average person, just stick with just a slight lean, maybe center of mass just slightly in front of your feet, if you want to get to that point. But don't worry about that. Just connecting hands and hips, and that's like the basic structure of a double pole. It's just really tight, up and down. A couple other quick details about the poles. Try to keep them in this plane alongside your body. Try not to bring them to center line, so that you do what's called like tent poling or something, where it comes out at an angle, because again, if we're pushing in, the energy is going that way. We want to keep them in this plane, not too close to our feet where we're actually pulling on top of our shoes or our skis or anything, and not too far out where we're, you know, shooting everything into this collision course. We want to keep it in this plane alongside our bodies. We also want to land our ski pole tips at or behind our feet. just like diagonal striding. Caveat again is the World Cup racers, when they're doing super fast, super powerful double pull, they're landing well in front of their feet so that they can really smash down on those poles. I'm not advocating that you do that. Shoot for somewhere at or about your feet when you're double pulling just normally. Because again, if you don't have the correct structure, the correct power and forward movement, landing your poles in front of you now turns into a pulling scenario, P-U-L-L-I-N-G scenario instead of a polling, P-O-L-I-N-G. So again, land your ski pole tips at or about your feet. This first series of demonstrations is of me double poling beginning from a standstill. I wanted to illustrate the fact that you can do this because your ski pole tips are at or behind your feet. So when you go into that compression, so that light crunch as well as a drop in your weight, because the ski poles are angled slightly forward because your arms are in front of you or you're grabbing the poles, you can just start from this standstill. You cannot do this if those ski pole tips are in front of you, in front of your feet. And by looking at it in such a very microscopic view, you can see how this is how you should be landing your ski pole tips every time. In this next series of clips, I'm double poling at a more normal pace. And what I'd like to do is point out the fact that although the terrain looks relatively flat, it does rise slightly as I travel away from the camera or if I'm traveling from the right to the left. And I think this is a good thing because it illustrates I'm adapting to those terrain features, so I'm either adding more power or laying off the gas depending on whether or not I'm going uphill or traveling slightly downhill. And as I was rewatching these clips, I did notice that on occasion my hands did travel slightly behind my hips. And this is okay because ultimately where we stop poling is going to be relative to how fast we're poling as well as how much power we're putting into it. And I say this because it's all about timing. And if I'm going very fast and achieving more glide, I may need a little bit more time before bringing my hips and my hands forward. So rather than just robotically stopping right there at the hips, again, a slight range in how far those hands are in relation to the hips so that I can then bring them forward at the same time as my hips and then drop down on the ski poles to maximize the power going into those ski poles that propels me forward. One additional note that I'd like to make about our arm swing through this double pole motion is that historically it was encouraged to get a really full extension. So you would see if you watch older cross-country skiing videos, particularly racing videos, you'll see these big sweeping arm movements all the way back and then all the way forward. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just not how cross-country skiing is taught anymore. And the main reason for that is because if it's a big sweeping arm movement to the rear, then we're going to have to make just as big of a sweeping arm movement to the front, and that takes time compared to stopping somewhere closer to our hips and then exploding forward. Although we may be losing some stylistic flourishes by no longer getting that full arm extension in double poling, I would argue that there's just as much grace in the economy of movement of contemporary cross-country skiers. Two notes about body mechanics that I'd like to point out while you're watching these demonstrations is that I do incorporate that slight tricep extension at the tail end of the compression phase. So for the most part, I'm hinging at my shoulders, keeping my arms structurally sound, and then towards the last bit where my hands are getting closer down to my hips, I do extend my arms in that triceps extension. So again, slightly complex body movement. It's not only a triceps extension, but it does incorporate that into the movement. The other note that I wanted to make was that when you're watching me ski away from the camera as well as toward the camera, it's most obvious, but I'm doing my best to avoid allowing my knees to collapse inward. And this is something that many people have issues with, myself included. If you've done any kind of weightlifting before and you've done squats, that's like a big no-no to allow those knees to collapse inward. We want to keep those knees in line with our feet for the most part as we drop down and then raise back up. But you can see, particularly back when I was starting from a standstill, I had more of a tendency to let those knees collapse in versus when I'm already in the middle of double poling. I decided after all to do a little bit of aggressive double poling just to illustrate some of the differences between that as well as the slower, more medium-paced double poling. Go ahead and pause this video when I reach the top of my extension, and you'll see just how far forward my hips are in relation to my feet. I also want to point out that because of the uneven terrain on which I'm skiing, there's a couple of times where I reach my upward extension just as I'm going over a little bump of snow, and I nearly go airborne. There's so many minor details that can yield big results once you start to embody them. So again, cross-country skiing, whether you're classic or skating, is a lifelong study. It's a lifelong practice. So just embrace that to its fullest and know that every time you go out, regardless of terrain or snow conditions, there's something that you can be practicing. So for me today, double poling. I also happen to be running some Osnes brand skis that are waxables. So they're a 68 millimeter off-track ski, and I'm using Clister wax today to play with that, to learn waxing for grip. And I find that, yeah, if you don't get the wax right, you don't get much grip. Therefore, you're doing a lot of double poling. So again, there's always something that you could be practicing. Okay, folks, that's about all I have today. A very basic technique with some subtle complexities to it, but very effective and very efficient travel on firm snow, on flats, downhill, and sometimes uphill, depending on angle of terrain and quality of snow, of course. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out TahoeTrailGuide.com for more information about cross-country skiing and snowshoeing here at Lake Tahoe, and just for general how-to articles. And if you have any questions or feedback, post it in the comments section below. I just want to say thank you to all of my supporters, whether that's you watching this show, giving me a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel, subscribing to my Patreon account, or sending gratuities and tips via Venmo or PayPal. I super appreciate all the support that you've given me. It encourages me and inspires me to keep moving forward, and hopefully keeps you moving forward as well. Anyway, take care, folks. Have a great rest of your season.